Hello, viewers. If this is your first time checking in with us, welcome. If you're returning, thank you. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. It's all to benefit a great cause, the Maryland Reno Foundation. Today I have a very special guest with me, a guest who is the embodiment of strength, resilience, and determination. Meeting her, no, not meeting her, the first time that we're ever meeting, but has made me to strive to make a difference, to work towards a better future. She's a widow to a blessed man, a mother to beautiful children, a survivor of cancer, and she works as a nurse. She's a caregiver to patients in need. The wonderful Karla Scott has amazingly decided to join the podcast. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I mean, I think you covered it.
Yeah.
I'm a registered nurse, which is my second career. I have 4 beautiful, amazing kids and a bunch of spares that also call me mom. And I am also a brand new grandma to a near perfect human being.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm a survivor.
You're a survivor.
I'm a survivor.
Similar to me, we've had to, adapt to a new life after the unfortunate passing of our spouse. How has your life changed since your husband passed away? Really, like taking on new roles. Like my life is like upside down. So I'm sure yours was very similar, or still is. I'm not sure, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, everything's changed. Everything's changed. My parenting has changed. My home has changed. My career has changed. I won't say that my outlook has changed, but that experience certainly kind of reinforced a lot of things I've always believed. And there's an interesting sort of culling that goes through your life when you lose your partner, your best friend. I think you learn to adapt, but you also learn to cull through all the things in your life, all the commitments, all the stuff you do, and really whittle it down to what matters most.
For me,
gives you a new focus.
Right. For me, it's the Maryland basically took care of everything. I was always just the guy who went out to work and gave her my paycheck, and she handled everything from there. She took care of the kids. She took care of doctor's appointments. She took care of the bills. She took care of buying food. She took care of everything. I was just I go to work. I work 90 hours a week. I don't care. She took care of everything else. And for me, this is the biggest change, is being a parent. Like I have 3 daughters, and being a single dad with 3 daughters, even my dog is female. I have nobody in my house that I can relate to on that level. So I'm surrounded by females. I always have been, but I enjoy that because I feel like I connect with females more. I can have a conversation with a female much easier than with another male. For me, it's just always been that way. So, but the biggest change is for everything that I have to take on now, all these new roles and tasks and everything that I have to do on a daily basis. Like it's just everything's different. So my life is upside down, spinning on its head like a break dancer in the 80s. Remember those guys that could like spin on their head for like minutes? Yeah. My life's been doing that for the last 8-9 months since my wife passed away. You yourself are a breast cancer survivor. So what was your experience when you were going through treatment?
For me, the cancer diagnosis was of course a shock, as it is for I think most of us. When we hear that C word, it just everything just stops. Yeah. For me, it was, I think the difficult part was that it was right at the start of the pandemic, what I refer to as COVID Classic, the original version. And, we were following the rules. My family's full of scientists, including my kids. So we really understood the need to, as they used to say, flatten the curve, which has gone completely out the window because so many people are stupid and don't understand science.
Well,
sounds harsh, but that's my reality.
my viral podcast had a lot to say about that.
My cancer treatment, was something that I did solo. Each of my kids lives in a different county, with the exception of my oldest. He was here, but he had things going on at the time. I was really just on my own. I drove myself back and forth to treatments, other than my surgeries where, my daughter came in for one, my best friend for another.
Yeah.
But every single treatment back and forth by myself. And for me, living in a more rural area where we don't have a major medical center or a cancer treatment center, that meant a drive of, an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes each way for every treatment. So when you're going for daily radiation, that's exhausting. There were times where I had to just pull over at the side of the road and take a cat nap just to make it safely home.
I know my wife went through 20 rounds of radiation therapy, and I know it's the biggest, the most prevalent side effect of it is being exhausted. It really, I would bring her and I would drop her off and I'd walk, and she'd be in there for 10 minutes. 50, the radiation treatment is like the most, she would tell me the most time it took was to set the machine up, and then the treatment took quick.
The treatment itself is really quick, but the side effects are just, it's like somebody pulled a plug in your feet and just drained every bit of energy out of your body.
Yep. That's what she used to come with. That's the most prevalent side effect that she had was being exhausted afterwards. So I used to drive her. I can't imagine you having to drive yourself. So we had very different, you lost your husband suddenly. He, if I read your bio correctly, he had some kind of a cardiac event.
The coroner determined that it was a fatal dysrhythmia. His heart just went into a weird rhythm and stopped. And it was mid-conversation. It was unexpected. There was no warning whatsoever. In fact, he'd had a full cardiac workup just a couple months before and been declared fine.
That's crazy.
And down he went, and he was gone. So I was left with 4 kids, ranging in age from 6 to 15. At that time I was a stay-at-home mom. My prior career was in Silicon Valley as an exec, but once you step out of Silicon Valley, particularly as a woman, particularly someone who didn't have a bachelor degree, I just had a lot of really good opportunities and worked my way up.
Right.
That's not something you can just jump right back into. So
you sacrificed your career for your family, and then because you had your husband who was providing for the family, and you guys made the same thing that me and my wife did. When my wife had a career, she went to college, she graduated from college. When she graduated, she got this really good job at this insurance company, and she was making excellent money for her position out of college. Right when she got out of college, she was making great money. She had room for advancement at the company. She was doing very, very well. But when we got pregnant with our first child, we had to talk about it. We did all the research. We looked at daycare centers, how much it was going to cost, and this, that, the other. And then when it finally broke down to it, it wasn't the cost had a little bit of factor to do with it, the amount of money she was making and the cost. But what it came down to was we wanted Marilyn to raise our kids. We wanted her to stay home, and we were willing to sacrifice to do that. So it seems like you and your husband made a similar decision that we did, where you sacrificed your professional career for the betterment of the family, which is what a lot of people do. And for me, it was the right choice. For you, I'm sure you guys felt like it was the right thing to do.
And it really was. Especially it was when our youngest was an infant.
Yes.
And he was a telecom exec. I was senior management. We were working at Silicon Valley, like a lot of places now, these tech firms, they just demand these crazy hours.
Yes.
And we just looked at each other like, what are we doing? We're paying someone else to raise our children. Yep. Somebody needs to stay home. Was Steve was the one really who brought it up. And he said, somebody needs to stay home. And he started to laugh. He said, I'd really rather it wasn't me. And, at first I thought he was crazy. I was like, do you realize how much income we're walking away from, and especially in California with the price of housing, even back then was just crazy.
Right.
And we decided we would make the sacrifice. My sacrifice was giving up, adult stimulation and a career that challenged me.
And
redirect that energy toward the kids entirely. His sacrifice was a really long commute. We moved out to the Central Valley, which has less expensive housing. And he commuted 114 miles each way every day for a long time.
That's like 2.5 hours on the road at least.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and with California traffic, it was probably worse, right?
It was crazy. But he did it, it was worth it for him. And the thing with Steve was, even though he was an exec, he was not a workaholic.
Right.
He went in, he did the job, and he did it so well. He was very well respected in his industry. But, if somebody wanted to schedule some meeting at 4:30, he'd be like, nope, see ya, I'm out of here. I'd rather be home with my wife and kids than with all you guys. And he'd just take off and go, regardless of what was going on. That's just the way at his memorial, there were coworkers I'd never met before who drove all the way down to our town just to meet me because they had to see what was the appeal. Why did Steve never do those late night meetings or those extra hours? And he had
an appreciation for his family. He knew that there's very important. There's one thing that a lot of people don't understand is like a lot of guys that I know, a lot of men that I know feel like going to work and providing for your family financially is like the only thing that you need to do. Like they feel like that you don't need to do anything besides that. Like this is my job and this is what I do and that's it. And besides that, I'm just gonna come home and I'm gonna be to myself and I'm gonna be selfish and I'm not gonna spend time with the kids and I'm gonna rely on you to do all that because I'm going to work and you're staying home. Well, that's not the way that it needs to be. It needs to be like people don't understand that, and I completely understand this now.
Well,
since my wife has passed away, being a parent is a full-time job.
I think when you're the survivor, you really gain a renewed appreciation that it's not the what that matters in life. It's the who. And the people in your life, the ones that really matter, are where your priority needs to be.
So what led you? What actually, like after your husband? So after your husband passed away, how long did it take? What led you to go towards nursing? Like what led you down that path? You were a Silicon Valley executive.
Well,
that's the same thing that I did. I went from construction to nonprofits and podcasts, and you went from Silicon Valley to the nursing field. That's a radical change.
Well, it is and it isn't. When I first was home with the kids, of course, I threw myself into all their activities. There were the play groups and the play dates and the mommy and me's and the little league and soccer and basketball and Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, band, choir, you name it. I mean, I was room mom. I was the field trip mom. I did all those things. But somewhere in the middle of that, I really had developed an urge to finally complete a bachelor's degree. And Steve encouraged me to do that. He said, why not go back? I said, you're crazy. Do you see how busy my job is? And he goes, no, I get it. He goes, but I think you can do it. And he really pushed me. So I had gone back to the JC. I had finished my general ed. I was ready to transfer to the local CSU to finish a bachelor's degree in psych with the intent of going on for my master's and becoming a marriage family therapist.
Okay.
But after Steve died, I really reassessed. And I thought, if I'm an MFT, every time I have one client who wants to make good choices and move forward with their life and make these great changes and have this, healthy, emotionally, mentally whole existence, I'm going to have like 30 clients who just want to whine and wallow every week.
Right.
And I have zero tolerance for that. I didn't have the opportunity to whine and wallow. Right. I had 4 kids looking to me like, gosh, Mom, how do we go on? The world has stopped. And I had to show them, your
perspective changed. Yeah.
Kids learn by your example. And I had taught my kids that life is lived forward. And even if all you can do in that day, in that moment, is crawl forward an inch or two, that's what you do. You can have your moment, then you pick yourself up and you move forward. And as a marriage family therapist, I don't know, how much money I would make if every week all I told people was suck it up, cupcake.
Right.
Change it. So I went back to school again and took all the hard sciences that I kind of skipped as a psych major, and had to really, again, push myself hard to get A's because the nursing programs are so competitive. Got accepted, transferred, and I did the nursing program. So I was commuting for the nursing program 75 miles each way, 5 days a week. And on top of that, I still did all the mom things. I did Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, band, choir, sports, room mom, field trip mom. I did all the home tasks, and I held a part-time job. I don't know how I did all that. I'm not sure I could do that today, but I did it, and I succeeded. My kids were my cheerleaders the whole way.
Yeah, that's amazing that then you chose a field that, like, honestly, right now is not very appreciated by many people. I was witness to a lot of it because, unfortunately, I was the Marilyn and I used to bring Marilyn to the hospital for treatment for her metastatic breast cancer before COVID, and then after COVID, and the differences were drastic in the level of and by no fault of the people working at the hospital. Just the hospital was full, and the ER was full. It was bad. I mean, it was a horrible experience for somebody with a terminal illness just trying to get relief for symptoms that were possibly life-threatening. And it was a horrible experience. And we had similar experiences between then and the time that she passed away. And I was just wondering what the state of the hospitals are now in relation to COVID, because you work in the hospitals and you've seen the struggles that people have had to deal with. Is it still similar to this even now, or is it starting to calm down a little bit?
Certain aspects of it calmed down, certainly at the beginning. And for the first, year plus, every time there was any kind of surge, I think the people that suffered the most were the people with chronic conditions and people with, conditions like cancer. I had more than one friend who had a child going through cancer treatment. And, when that's your kid, watching them and knowing they need medical care and not being able to get it is so frustrating, seeing these lines at the ER and knowing not only is there a line at the ER, but these are potentially dangerously contagious people. I think one of the things that the pandemic has brought into sharp relief for all of us is, you have that friend, that neighbor, even a relative that you love, that you've interacted with for so many years, you've had them to your home, all of these things. And then you discover that they don't care enough about you to wear a mask. Like it's just the dissonance of that just makes me crazy. But at the beginning, it was terrible. I think there is more throughput in the ERs at this point. The ERs in most places have returned to a new normal.
Right.
Cancer, you always talk about your new normal. And the same is true, I think, COVID. COVID has changed some things forever. And there are a lot of, it's not just access to care, but the experience of these patients is so different since COVID. There are still restrictions on visitors, for instance, and, who we allow into the hospitals. And that can be hard, very mentally and emotionally draining on these patients, to not have their full support network right there at the bedside when they're going through something that's not just physically horrible, but mentally and emotionally horrible as well. So limiting that network for these patients, I think is quite harmful and something that unfortunately has been unavoidable through this whole pandemic.
Yeah, before COVID, when Marilyn had to go to the hospital, Marilyn was she was strong. She was tough. She had a high tolerance for pain. when we had to go to the hospital, it was because we had symptoms that we couldn't handle at the house, and her doctor's office wasn't open. Because most people will understand that
Yeah.
if somebody who's dealing with stage 4 breast cancer needs treatment for symptoms, your first option is to go to your oncologist's office, because usually they have an infusion center and they can give you what you need without having to go to the hospital. So you can avoid going to the hospital as long as your oncologist office is open. You know what I mean? So when you have to go to the hospital, when you're dealing with something like you can't deal with shit, it was always something side effect from chemotherapy. It was a nerve pain, or she had spots of cancer on parts of her skeleton that just like affected nerves in her face and affected nerves in her legs and affected, just gave her everyday constant chronic pain. So there were some times when we couldn't, remedy her symptoms at home. And before COVID, she would be mad when we were going to the hospital that we actually had to go. Like, I can't believe I gotta go back to the hospital. This sucks so bad. After COVID, she was scared to go to the hospital. She did not want to go to the hospital because on the way to the hospital, she would keep saying to me, I'm doing all this fucking treatment. Like, sorry, swearing, but I'm doing all this fucking treatment. I'm going through all this shit, and I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to fuck around and I'm going to get COVID and I'm going to die from COVID. And she was like genuinely nervous about going into the emergency room. She did not want to go in there. And even if she had life-threatening symptoms, she was thought that she was going to get COVID while she was waiting to get treatment. And that's what a lot of people deal with who are, quote unquote, immunocompromised, or they have a underlying condition where COVID is going to affect them in an adverse way. And it was very alarming to me, like you said, the amount of people who were just willing to like disregard that for their ability to not wear a cloth mask over your face. Like, how fragile are you really? Like, are you that fragile of a human being where you can't put a mask over your face?
Yeah, like, really, unfortunately, people are.
It's insane.
I think I shared with you when we spoke on the phone, I lost one of my favorite patients just last year. Just this dear, sweet lady struggling with cancer. I knew her as a patient because she was in the hospital so many times over, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of just fighting this cancer. And you know how that cycle goes. You get treatment and the side effects are too great and you need medical management for it, or you end up with an infection because you're so immunocompromised. There are various reasons that these patients come into the hospital, but I would see her either in the ER or as an inpatient, and we kind of developed this friendship and this rapport. So last fall, she came in with COVID. She had been cared for by her daughter, and her daughter unfortunately attended one of these churches that preaches faith over fear and was kind of anti-mask, and her daughter had gone to home Bible studies and things like this and caught COVID and gave it to mom. And here is this beautiful, wonderful woman that I've known and loved for so many years as my patient. And she comes in and she says, "Oh, Karla, I'm so glad you're my nurse. I feel better now." She says, "I'm going to get through this, right?" And I'm holding her hand and I'm smiling and I'm encouraging her. And I'm telling you, you know what? I'm going to be right here with you. I will be right here with you. And we will fight right alongside you. Knowing absolutely in my head that she has days.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. And, every time I would encourage her and pump her up in her room, of course she was in this isolated room. She couldn't have visitors. She's like by herself. And I'd leave the room and just sob because I knew she wouldn't beat it. And of course she didn't. So that, and that's an extreme example, but we've had so many patients come through who just refuse to comply with the simplest of guidelines, just distance. You don't have to have a huge Thanksgiving gathering. You didn't have to have a giant wedding with 300 or 400 people, but people insist on it. Like their whole life would be destroyed if they didn't have this this gathering of 50 people in their living room for Thanksgiving, and next thing you know, 4 or 5 of them are dead from COVID. And they're baffled by it. That's the really surprising thing, is they're baffled by it. Like, I don't understand how this could happen. It's like, what do you mean you don't understand?
You don't understand because you're ignorant. You don't believe in science. I think
it's a willful ignorance. It's a willful ignorance. Anybody who's ignorant at this point is willfully choosing that ignorance. They're choosing to live in that lie because they are too selfish to make the most basic sacrifice for their fellow humans. And I have zero tolerance for it at this point.
When people ask me, like, because I'm very engaging on social media and a lot of issues, but I engage with a lot of people on one of my social media apps, and the people ask me, like, why were you so quick to get the vaccine? And I said, well, first of all, I wasn't quick to get the vaccine. Okay, I got the vaccine when it was available to me. Honestly, I would have taken it the first day. The first time that I saw a doctor take it, or a nurse take it, or a medical professional take it, I would have taken it right after that person did, because that person is way more educated than I am in these matters. And if that educated person who knows that much about medicine and science is willing to put that inside of their body to protect themselves from COVID, well, then I should be willing to do the same thing. Or I feel like I'm more of an expert than they are in the medical field. And that doesn't make sense, because I've never attended one college class that has anything to do with any kind of medical science. So I don't understand why people have this. It's smartphones. Smartphones have made people amazingly stupid. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I tell people, like, if you're still afraid of the vaccine at this point, if you're scared of the microchip, put down your phone, put on your foil hat, and get your jab. Like, what is wrong with you? But and it really has been a struggle. But I think it's really, the effect on cancer patients is not just the physical danger. The effect on cancer patients of this dissonance, this willful ignorance of so many in the general population, has had a mental and emotional toll on cancer patients and their families.
My wife went through it. We were prisoners.
These are people who are they're genuinely afraid for their lives to begin with, and then they can't go literally anywhere because they are at risk from these willfully ignorant, selfish people who are trying to kill them. So it's not just cancer that's trying to get you. There are all these people in the general public, people in your own families sometimes who, I've been fortunate. My family's full of scientists. Everybody in my family has some sort of scientific or technical kind of bent.
You're very blessed. You're very blessed to have all educated people in your family.
But I know
very, very blessed.
There's so many families where that's just not true. So imagine having your own family member trying to kill you because they can't follow the most basic rules. Of course, again, I work in healthcare. So even before the pandemic, I understood the ignorance that was out there. I have treated more patients with intestinal infections, for instance, who contracted these horrible illnesses, which can be life-threatening, because they just didn't know how to wash their hands properly. Like, I mean, it's crazy. And I think COVID has just brought a lot of that into sharp relief, and for cancer patients in particular, it has created a situation that is just so restrictive and so harsh. These conditions are harsh for cancer patients.
They're grim. There was, like I said, my wife was scared. I can speak of her, how she felt. I know firsthand. I have firsthand experiences going to the hospital with her, and just going anywhere, not just going to the hospital, going to the grocery store, she never left the house. She once COVID hit, and she knew, her doctor told her, like, you really need to be careful. You're immunocompromised. You don't really have like an immune system to speak of, kind of. So you really need to be careful. We basically went on lockdown. I mean, me, my wife, and my kids, they were being homeschooled anyway. The schools all all went virtual. I was fortunate enough to be able to take. I only went into the office one day a week for like a few hours. I had to go talk to my guys and have a meeting, and I was fortunate enough to FaceTime helped me. I was able to guide my crew on FaceTime a lot, but we were extremely concerned about getting COVID. I was extremely concerned because I was the only one really leaving the house. So it's like I was extremely careful when I left the house. I was extremely careful all the time because me and my wife saw that my family saw the vaccine as like a ray of light. Like we can finally like maybe start to do things.
Well, the hard
And then
thing
it
is,
was
though,
very
for cancer
disheartening when not
patients,
that many people bought into it. It was
the hard thing for cancer patients, though, is that when your immune system is compromised, you don't necessarily have the ability to reap the full benefits of a vaccine. The vaccine depends on your immune system's response. You know, people, it's like this constant education I have to do with people about the flu shot. Oh, I don't get the flu shot because it gives me the flu. It doesn't give you the flu. It cannot, scientifically speaking, give you the flu. It contains deactivated virus, dead virus. It's just like when the military practices maneuvers or a drill or whatever, fake tanks and fake buildings, you know, they're just like, you know, or police even, you know, they run these drills, you know, and they're props. So we're giving your immune system a prop so that it will learn to recognize it. But what has to happen is your immune system has to respond to it, right? It has to say, oh, this thing, let's figure out how to fight this thing. And then it develops this defense. The reason you feel lousy after receiving that, you know, one of these vaccines is that your immune system has responded just the way it does when you are sick. Your immune system is busy, your body is busy, so you're going to feel fatigued, you're going to feel achy, you might run a little fever. That's your immune system doing its thing. And once it figures it out, you're going to feel better. And forever after that, when you encounter that particular type of cootie, your immune system is going to know what to do. But in cancer patients, that's not necessarily true. So we're seeing cancer patients who have to have an extra shot and an extra shot just to try to develop any immunity at all.
Any kind of immunity, yes.
And I think the problem we have now that these newer variants of COVID are out there, is that there's a greater relaxation of our vigilance, right? So people are going about their daily lives. They're going in and out of stores without masks. They aren't worried about it anymore because for many, many people, a much higher percentage than it used to be, if they do get COVID, they will recover fairly quickly. However, this is not true for immunocompromised cancer patients. And so now they're out, and if they go out in public, there's almost, in some ways, an even greater risk, right? Because this, you know, watered down version of COVID that won't kill every other member of your family can still kill you.
Yes.
You know, and we have to maintain our vigilance, creating that wall around our immunocompromised cancer patients, our loved ones.
How long have you spoken with anybody, or do you have an opinion on how long it's going to take for like the COVID to be like the flu, where we could like literally like prevent it by just getting the flu shot? And just, you know, people who are like, I know what is this still 50, there's still 50 to 60,000 people a year die from the flu, right? And these are mostly immunocompromised people and people who are dealing with chronic diseases, right? These are like the people who die from the flu, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there are always exceptions to even that,
right?
You know, otherwise healthy people, especially children. But I think we're already. I mean, all the experts have said that we're already transitioning to a point where it's endemic rather than pandemic. It's just going to be part of our lives now. And you know, the thing with the flu is there's not just one version of it, just like COVID. There's always a new variant, and what the World Health Organization, the CDC, these groups of scientists, they get together, they use their years of experience, their expertise in dealing with these particular viruses. and they come up with their best guess for next season, and they create a recipe. Okay, this year's flu vaccine is going to contain this. And they create this best guess scenario based on all the data and all the trends, and they come up with a flu vaccine for this coming year that is going to be the closest we can guess at what will help your body fight it. And I think we're probably at some point going to approach that with COVID. Again, that's not my area of expertise. You know, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I get the sense, and in talking to the people that I know who are involved in that field of science, that's kind of the direction we're headed. That's the goal. We're never going to eradicate COVID. COVID is just with us now. So I think two things need to happen. One, we need to just get smarter about how we approach this as a population. And then I think the other thing that needs to happen is we need to work that same vigilance into our daily lives, because COVID's not going to be the last virus.
Not novel. That's
what people devastating effect. I think there are going to be other things that come along, and we need to be better prepared to handle it.
Yes, through the history of time, there's always been something new that hits the scene. Absolutely. That causes devastating loss of life until they can come up with a plan. And that's what I think what missed a lot of people was this was something completely new that science had never seen before. So they had to develop a whole new plan. They didn't really have a game plan. Did they really have a game plan for this, or was this something completely new that
so
really
COVID is not completely new. Remember that that is the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Yep. So we'd already seen SARS, and we stopped it in its tracks because we isolated it, we shut it down, we did all the contact tracing, we did all the things. So, people talk about this vaccine, for instance, being too new and we don't trust it. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Scientists were working on a vaccine for the SARS virus years before. So they were able to take what they were already working on and just kind of pivot a little bit and modify what they were doing and come up with a virus prevention quickly, because we already had the groundwork laid. We already had the starting point.
And a lot of people don't take it.
It's not brand new. We didn't just all of a sudden pull out our box of vaccine tinker toys and put this thing together. That's not how it worked. We already had this stuff in place, in progress.
And I think what a lot of people didn't take into account was the amount of money that the world invested into the research and development.
Money and COVID. Cooperation. You have to.
It was like $60 billion they invested.
Well, and there's so much. The cooperation amongst the scientific community, I think, for this particular incident, was unprecedented. Because rather than keeping the research close to their chest and we'll let you know what we're up to when we have our results, when we get to the end, when we have something to publish and we can show you how wonderful this all is. Instead, scientists were like, what, we tried this and this happened. Maybe you guys could work on this while we work on that. And they created this collaborative, international, multicultural, just melting pot of brain power, really.
I have a theory about why that happened.
The way that the scientific community pulled together was so amazing for this. And when you see these people who are supposedly scientific, who are kind of on the other side of the argument, you have to understand what crazy outliers they really are. The whole of the true scientific community really did pull together in an unprecedented way to fight this thing and to give us these resources and to save lives.
Another thing that people don't focus on enough too, and don't realize one of the reasons why I started the foundation is the extreme costs of being sick in this country. There is an extreme cost attached to dealing with cancer, with dealing with a chronic disease of any kind. Now, I can just speak about cancer.
in particular, the costs are extremely high. Everything is expensive, and the medical field, the people who run these hospitals and the insurance companies and all these people, they don't care about you. They don't care about if you're on the street, if you have to sell your house. They want your 401k, they want your retirement, they want your kids' college fund, they want everything before they'll give you proper treatment, it seems. And this whole COVID thing with these unvaccinated patients being in treatment. Now, the treatment that a lot of these COVID patients were receiving is extremely expensive. You're being on a ventilator, you're in the hospital. That's the most hot. That's the hospital is the most expensive hotel in the whole world. You don't really get room rates like a hospital gets anywhere else, kinda. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't get to collect points and get a free stay. You
right?
Don't,
yeah,
you
yeah.
don't get any of that stuff. And and it's a shame. We are the only developed nation in the world that does not have universal health care, and there is zero excuse for it. I don't want to hear about how it's too expensive or taxes would go up. Taxes should not go up on you and I.
No.
What needs to happen is the wealthy need to pay their fair share. I'm not talking about an excessive tax, but if these 1%ers paid the same percentage that you and I pay, we could cover it. We could more than cover it. We could do that.
Not even just
throw in free college and still fund the military. Like we could do it all. But it's selfishness and greed. But the bottom line, I think, for patients now, I'm fortunate. I work for a nonprofit healthcare system, one of the largest systems in Northern California. I think they are the largest in Northern California, and it's a good system. I'll add the caveat: all my opinions are my own, don't reflect my employer in any way. They're not the necessarily shared opinions. But healthcare organizations on the whole are they're businesses, and they can create a really sort of abusive relationship with their staff. And I have to say that the healthcare system I work for is better than others that I've worked for.
Why is it?
But at the end of the day, people should not have to choose between the roof over their heads, the food on their table, and their health. And, I work in neuroscience right now as a nurse. And, I've had patients, I can't even count how many patients I've had who came into the hospital with, for instance, a massive stroke. Not because of anything really under their control, but more because they simply couldn't afford medication for their chronic condition. And there's this weird argument, they caused their chronic condition, so they deserve what they get. And it's just simply not true. There are so many scientific factors that play into even hypertension and obesity, chromosomal things, genetics that play into it. And people have conditions that need treatment.
And access to food supply.
When you can't afford the healthy food, when you can't afford the medication that keeps your hypertension under control, for instance, the consequences are things like strokes. And I have had people with devastating, life-changing brain injuries as a direct result of our crap healthcare system and lack of real coverage and lack of access to healthy food and preventative care and education and medication.
Why do you work for a nonprofit healthcare? You said you worked for a nonprofit healthcare system. Why aren't all healthcare systems nonprofit? Like, wouldn't that make more sense if every healthcare system in the whole country was nonprofit?
I worked for last year. I had two jobs. I worked for this nonprofit that I've been with for so many years and I'm so happy with. Yeah. And I also worked for one of the largest for-profit healthcare organizations in the world. And I have to tell you, the difference in care is night and day. The difference in management attitude is night and day. Yeah, because
it's not for profit.
Well, I think, the masks are off in that for-profit organization. When you come to management and say, we need to do XYZ for this patient because it's the safest method, it's the best course of care, it's what's best for the patient and their family. And they say, well, too bad, it's too expensive, we're not doing that, we're going to do this instead. The mask is off, the gloves are off. They're just being real about it. It all comes down to their shareholders, and they do not give what's about their patients at the end of the day. Whereas thankfully, the organization that I am full-time with is a nonprofit. And while there is cost concern, because we have to continue to keep our doors open and serve and do what we are doing, there is a compassionate layer to all that we do. And that really helps maintain this little piece of soul that is so important and so essential to delivering quality care.
Yeah, because it's that's why I've decided, honestly, I started a nonprofit, the Maryland Reno Foundation, to specifically help people with what we're talking about. My number one goal is to, honestly, it was starting out doing some just like I've joined a boating club. There's a lake right next to my house, and it's very expensive to get onto the lake. We're going to start doing, I'm going to start doing outreach to give people boat rides, the opportunity to go on the lake for a half a day or a whole day, depending on the scheduling. But we could go out and make some memories. Introduce them to the foundation, and talk to them about what I plan on doing in the future. What I plan on doing is I want to provide these health spending cards for people to pay for their co-pays, to pay for their prescriptions. Basically, just issue them like a prepaid card that they can use to just pay for medical debts, similar to if you had a health spending account at work. You can use pre-tax dollars to pay for medical debt, right? At work, they can give you like a debit card. I want to kind of do the same kind of deal. I've been talking to a couple of people about it, and I think I can make this happen with the proper funding. This is where I see, because like you said, all these hospitals that are run by, that have shareholders, I've been saying this for years, they want you in a cardboard box on the side of the road before they put you in a pine box and they stuff you in the ground. You know what I mean? So it's like they want everything you have, and it's daunting. It's hard to do. Like you spoke about earlier, how you had to go through all of your cancer treatments alone. You had to drive yourself to therapy. You had to drive yourself to treatments. You had to stop at the side of the road and take naps. Now, I'm sure you could have benefited a little from a little support. Then you could have probably just benefited a little if there was just somebody there to help you, guide you along. You didn't need the financial support. You said you and your husband were pretty successful, but I'm sure there's other ways that you could have used some support, and that there's women who are out there who are dealing with the same thing that my wife dealt with no support. They're alone. The same as
financially, even, for me, I mean, so many years out from my husband's death. I mean, he financially, I'm as broke as the next guy. I've been a single mom for 16 years.
Everyone's broke.
But the cancer treatment thing, that's really interesting. That's another deficit in our society as Americans that is very unique to America. And other countries look at us and scratch their heads and say, why is it like this? When you're going through cancer treatment, you go out on disability, and you might qualify, depending on the state, you might have a little bit of coverage that covers this tiny little portion of your normal income. You might have or might not have some job protection. You might or might not, FMLA gives you 12 weeks. 12 weeks is nothing in a cancer bucket. And even if you do it as an intermittent leave, that's challenging. Even if you have long-term disability insurance, many employers do it. Even my employer, which has excellent benefits by American standards, can really kill you. I have another surgery that I need to have that I can't afford right now, because once I run out of PTO, if I no longer have PTO that I can charge, I have to cover the full cost of my benefits every month. So not only would I be on disability, I would have to somehow generate an extra, I think it's like $1,300, $1,500 a month to cover the healthcare premiums just to keep my benefit
I can speak on that.
going.
I can speak on that from
and it's just not financially possible. Where the heck does that money come from? Where do they think I'm going to get that?
Well, I can speak on that from personal experience, exactly the scenario that you were just speaking about, because like I said, I owned a small company. My wife worked for a corporation. She had excellent health benefits. Okay. So she carried the health insurance for the family. Me, my wife, and my kids were all under her health coverage at her job. So when she got re-diagnosed stage 4, she worked for about a year after that. And then she finally went on short-term leave. Once COVID hit and she went virtual working, my wife was still working through stage 4 cancer for the social aspect of it, and the mental stimulation that she got from going to work and engaging with people and having adult interactions. That's the reason why she continued to work. And then once they went virtual with COVID, she decided to go on short-term leave, which went to long-term leave. And once you go to long-term leave, you have the option to keep your healthcare, like you said, but you have to pay COBRA. And for me and my wife and my family, for the family plan, for the coverage that we had, it was $1,900 a month.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The health insurance.
Where's that going to come
from? Right. We had to take on that bill. That was another bill that, along with the maximum out-of-pocket expense that we met every single year by May, which was $9,981. So it's like, if you take in the cost of COBRA, you take in the maximum out-of-pocket expenses, and then you take in just everyday expenses that you have just to be a human being and survive in this country, you need a tremendous amount of money. If you're unfortunate to get sick in this, you need a tremendous amount of money to survive. And there's a drastic need for people, not only just people dealing with metastatic breast cancer. I chose to focus on that one particular disease because that's what affected my family. You know what I mean? And I saw the struggle that my wife went through, and I honestly witnessed too much to sleep at night without trying to help somebody out with this, because I am fortunate enough where I can take the time out of my life and focus on this. And I am fortunate enough, and I think, I'm grateful that I'm fortunate enough to do the things that I'm able to do and focus my time on this. And I'm going to be counting on people like you and others to help me spread the word and spread the awareness and get the foundation's name out there, because honestly, my foundation could become one of the most successful foundations in the country, and there would be a need for 100 more of them. There would be a need. We'll never have enough. There'll never be enough support to truly take the burden off of people while they're dealing with diseases like this. There'll never be enough. It's impossible. It's too much money. You know what I mean? And it's that's the problem. Is my wife qualified for Medicare? She passed away before her waiting time expired. Why is there a 2-year waiting period to get onto Medicare when you're dealing with a terminal disease? It's insane.
It's crazy.
She passed. They told us, oh, you'll be qualified. You can go on Medicare starting December of 2023.
Yeah, I mean that's completely nuts. I mean,
my wife said to her, "I'm probably not going to be alive then."
There, yeah. So and you just see it time and again. Patient after patient after patient, family after family after family, struggling with these same issues. And I think that's one thing that's key for foundations like yours, is to remember collaboration over competition. Mm-hmm. Your individual family, my individual family, another individual family struggling with these issues. Banding together is how change happens. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
You see it with unions, which I'm totally in favor of.
Yes. I was in the union.
Having some corruption issues, I think on the whole, they're a huge help, and there's a greater need for them than ever in America. But that sort of collaboration, that collective bargaining, is how we make change happen. So your voice on its own, doing this one thing and having this niche that you're trying to fill for a particular type of cancer and a particular type of need is one thing. But when you can partner with other organizations also benefiting other cancer patients, and kind of create that groundswell is how change occurs. And I think it's going to take a significant effort to really make real healthcare reform happen in the United States, but it needs to happen. It needs to happen. You know, I mentioned my surgery that I need to have, and you know, my kids are nervous about that. They've already lost one parent. They'd rather not lose another, you know, and they're like, Mom, your doctor's really recommending that this needs to happen. And I'm trying to explain my financial reality to them. And even as adults, they don't really get it. Goodness, we've got the next door's gardeners have started up, so I apologize for the noise.
You're fine.
But, you know, when we look at this kind of thing, and I told them, I said, you know, honestly, financially, it works best for me if I just get a little bit of cancer again. Not a lot. You know, I don't really want a lot because we don't want to go through that. And it's sort of tongue in cheek, but you know, financially, if I get a little bit of cancer, I have this supplemental insurance policy through my employer that will pay me cash money to get through the treatment, and it would be financially beneficial for me. So I'm not averse to a tiny little bit of cancer. How screwed up is that?
That's an insane way of thinking.
That is an insane way of thinking, but that's the financial reality for millions upon millions.
A lot of people. There's a lot of people out there right now.
You know, gosh, I have the supplemental catastrophic illness insurance that pays X if I get one of this short list of diseases. So, you know, you almost cross your fingers when you're going through a bunch of tests and stuff with your doctor, hoping that whatever he comes up with is on that short list. That's so screwed up.
Yeah.
That is so screwed up. And that's healthcare in America in a nutshell. Awful. That's it.
It's awful. And it's like
the healthcare lottery ticket. You know,
do you think it's
of retiring? I'm going to be working. I'm going to personally be working from now till Jesus comes back. Like I'm going to be that old nurse that they make the viral video about. You know, still working at 90 and turning these heavy patients and doing all the things because I don't have a retirement. I've been raising 4 kids for the last 16 years. So
I think anyone who's in a similar
financial reality is where the bulk of Americans live, and unfortunately, the people that make the rules, the people that make the laws, the people that make the tax laws, the healthcare rules, the people that keep profit and insurance companies as part of this healthcare mix, they are the 1%ers, and they don't have to worry about this. You know, we have people in this country who have so much more wealth than, I mean, I saw a statistic the other day that was talking about salaries and wages and this kind of thing. And they were saying that $40,000 a year is higher income than like 40% of the American population. That's insane. Who lives on that? Who lives on that? So
I know a lot of people who unfortunately have to live on wages like that, and it's a struggle.
With the cost of living, the cost of rents and mortgages, and the interest rates are going up, and the prices are going up. You know, I myself am not. I'm in the process of a move, and I'm going to be renting because I can't afford to buy. You know, and people are living with this, and then dealing with cancer on top of it, and it needs to change. It needs to change.
I think that honestly I don't understand why insurance companies can dictate a patient's health care. Why me and my wife, when my wife was going through, she went through 5 different types of chemotherapy between her first diagnosis and all of the chemotherapy that she went through with her stage 4 diagnosis. And every time that her doctor wanted to change therapy, he would say to us, well, I can't really give it to you today. We're not going to change the treatment. I have to call the insurance company.
Oh God.
And make sure that and make sure that they'll pay for it, because insurance companies usually don't like to pay for new treatments.
And I would say that rule the world. I can't tell you how many times insurance companies get to overrule your physician.
How is that legal? That's the problem, is like they need to
because capitalism wins at the end of the day every time in America. Every decision comes back to capitalism, and you know,
for profit. Everything's going to be for profit.
Everything is, and it's frustrating. You know, I work alongside these physicians who have just years and years and years of expertise, and they know what they're talking about, and they know what they're doing, and they order these treatments knowing that this is the best course of action for this patient. And then the insurance company comes back and says, yeah, but we could just also do this.
We could do this other cheaper option that doesn't have the same results.
Option, this, I've had to go through that argument. I can't tell you how many times with my insurance company over the years when it comes to just the inhaler I use for my asthma, because I can't tolerate the one they prefer I use. And they keep trying to push me toward it and say, well, maybe you should just try it again. Well, no, it causes dysrhythmias that affect my heart. And no, I'm not going to try it again. I need this other one. And I'm sorry that it's going to cost you another $10, but
right? What the fuck? Oh my
God. Like, I need to breathe. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. It's a thing. It's a weird, quirky thing with just me. I'm an unusual patient. What can I say? I like to breathe. I can't with these freaking insurance companies. Last year because of my type of breast cancer and how it was found and a lot of factors, I'm supposed to, according to my oncologist, my radiation oncologist, my surgeon, all have recommended that I have a breast MRI every 6 months, not just a mammogram. And every 6 months, I have to go through the same battle with the insurance company over and over and over and over and over again. And my last breast MRI did not happen at 6 months. It happened at 18 months because of that battle.
Jesus,
and as you know, 18 months can make a really big difference if there happens to be a tumor growing.
I'll tell you a quick little story about how my wife was 2014. She got diagnosed first. 2015 is when she had her mastectomy and deep flap surgery, and when they said that she was quote unquote cancer free. Okay.
Yeah, I love that one.
2015. Cancer free. Fast forward to 2018, my wife was complaining about stomach pain all year. She went for, I can't even tell you how many tests, so many scripts, so many different medications, everything. You know how they found her cancer? This is early 2019 now. She was complaining almost the whole 2018 about stomach pain. They sent her for a ultrasound. They thought she had a gallbladder stones. They sent her for the ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech said, hey, we need to check this woman's liver. It looks weird. It doesn't look, it's got like a scalloped texture to it. It's weird. We need to check this woman's liver. And sure enough, too many tumors to count. So she went from cancer-free in 2015 to having stomach pain for all of 2018. And I don't know why they didn't check for her cancer. We just assumed that they were. Me and my wife were I'm like, I say to her, babe, you sure it's not the cancer coming back? Like, you sure you know? And she's like, yeah, I'm going for all these blood tests, and they're checking this, and they're checking, they're saying it's not that, they're saying it could be this and this. And they checked her stomach lining, they scoped down her throat, they stuck a scope up her ass, they did all kind of testing, and they avoided it. And when they finally found it, she was all over her skeleton, all over her ribs, all over her back, all over her. She had spots on her head, spots on her back, spots on her legs. She had too many tumors in her liver to count. So when I hear about you, when your doctors are saying that you need an MRI every 6 months because that's what they recommend with the type of cancer that you had, and I'm hearing that you're not be able to get a MRI for 18 months because you're arguing with the fucking insurance company, don't mind my French, it worries me that you're like everybody else. You're just a normal person, just like you're just a normal woman who had breast cancer. You're not anybody special. You're not get treated any special. You're not get treated any different. There's millions of women that are like you that had breast cancer before, because it's the most commonly diagnosed cancer for women, right? I'm right on that. And 30%, unfortunately, 30% of women that have early stage breast cancer will move on to stage 4. And once you go stage 4, you got 5 years. 80% of the women who get diagnosed with stage 4, 80% die before 5 years. Only 20% make it as a long hauler. And I don't know how long the life expectancy is past that, but it's a daunting reality that you have to face, because you could potentially have your disease progressing the same as my wife did, while you're waiting for some fucking guy at an insurance company to make a decision about your health care.
Exactly.
Your doctor
and
should make the decision.
That's one of the big factors. I mentioned that I worked for this horrible Satan's healthcare organization last year.
Yep.
And that was a big factor in my decision to go back full time with the nonprofit that I've been with for so many years, because I don't have to fight them. When my surgeon who works in of course I'm restricted. I have to stay within their system. Luckily, they're the largest system in Northern California. So I have plenty of options, and they're excellent qualified physicians. Not everybody is so fortunate. But when my surgeon says, hey, my patient has this history and she needs this test, they go, check, okay, off you go. And it just happens. Now it's just down to scheduling. Another delay of the pandemic.
Another problem with COVID.
Schedule longer to get a follow-up appointment. So I have an annual checkup that was supposed to happen in March, got delayed till May. Then it got delayed till August. Now it's delayed again indefinitely. So I cannot get that test because I can't see the physician who's supposed to order it.
It's insane. It's insane.
Thanks to the pandemic.
Thanks to the pandemic.
But you see this struggle. Like, I work in this healthcare system. I understand how to navigate it. I understand how these insurance appeals work and who has to be contacted and what letters to write and all of this stuff. An average person who's just trying to figure this out while dealing with cancer treatment, it's this horrible, daunting thing that just adds this incredible burden to patients and their families that just shouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist.
It should not. You shouldn't have to worry. If you get, this is the probably, I don't know about other countries, but this is a horrible country to live in when you're dealing with a chronic disease. It really is. And it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have, like you said, you shouldn't have to make a decision between getting your treatment and paying your mortgage. You shouldn't have to make a decision between buying food or making your copays. And that's what a lot of people have to deal with. Me and my wife, we were fortunate to have support. And that's why I felt the need for the foundation. And when I hear stories like you having to go to treatment all by yourself, having to deal with all of these things, tasks all by yourself, taking on all these new roles, you not only became a single parent, you had to become the breadwinner, then you were dealing with cancer, and there's a lot of women who are dealing the same types of situations that you dealt with, whether it's maybe they didn't lose their husband, but maybe they have an unsupportive spouse who left them once they got sick, because that happens a lot.
Oh, it happens a whole lot.
A lot. You have a lot of women and men too, men who get diseases. I'm just speaking about breast cancer, but you have a lot of women who get abandoned by their spouses because their spouse doesn't want to deal with it. They say, well, I didn't sign on for this. Oh, really? I thought in your vows it said you did sign on for it. Yeah. So, these are the people that I'm trying to help the most. Everybody needs a little bit of support, but honestly, the people who need it the most are the people who don't have any. People that are fortunate to have support feel fortunate, because me and my wife were very fortunate, and I will never be able to repay people what they did for me. And just most of them, some of them were absolute strangers, some of them are my closest friends and family, but it was a broad spectrum of people who were willing to help us.
I was very fortunate that I got some community support. There's an organization called Help One Woman, and Help One Woman helped me, and it was a blessing beyond. I can't even describe what a blessing that was to me. First of all, to just not feel alone in dealing with what I was dealing with, but the financial benefit. It is such a shame that cancer patients have to worry so much about their finances when they're fighting for their lives.
Yes.
It's despicable. It's disgraceful. America should be ashamed.
Ashamed of themselves. I've been saying that for a long time.
So that organization was a huge, and I'm so incredibly grateful to my community for what they did for me.
I am too, and that's why I've decided to do what I've done. I could be a capitalist and go right back into the construction field and probably be pretty financially stay pretty successful, but I'd just be successful for myself and for my family. And in the grand scheme of things, that's not what I'm about anymore. I'm sure your perspective changed a lot after you lost
after you lost your husband, your perspective on life changed and what really important.
It did.
And that's the same thing that happened to me. Honestly, what's important to me now is completely different than what it was before. And I'm looking forward to making this foundation a success. We're just in the starting. I mean, we just started. I mean, this is like, we're in the ground stages here. I mean, I just got my 501c3 status in March. So, I mean, we're just in the ground floor, but we are slowly making progress. And I'm hoping to be able to utilize this podcast. This is the main reason why I started this podcast, was to spread awareness and to be like a sounding board. I'm going to have doctors on here and other professionals like you on here. And I'm hoping that you'll come back on it at some point. If I, you come up with a topic, or we come up with or just to talk about life in general. You seem like you're a pretty interesting woman, and we seem to share the same views on a lot of things. So we haven't disagreed much here. So I mean, it was very, but I mean, I think we can just take away from this experience as like there is with this whole COVID and the hospitals and the access to healthcare for people who are dealing with chronic disease. It's not going to get better anytime soon, but hopefully it'll get back to something where people can actually survive. There's a lot of people suffering needlessly right now because of the disbelief in science, and it's
I think
troubling.
You're seeing some changes
Yes.
that are a little more normal. You know, we are allowing, for instance, our hospitals in our system are allowing some limited visitors again.
Yep.
Which, from a nurse perspective, I can say there are a lot of us who actually, for the most part, enjoyed the no visitors thing.
Right.
Not initially, you know, when COVID was really bad, it was hard because, you know, people were dying and nobody should die alone.
No.
But you know, now as we're moving forward, we've kind of got our rhythm with dealing with COVID, and allowing some visitors in is very good for our patients. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all about.
What is the at the hospitals that you work at, or I'm sure you have friends who work in the medical field. I'm sure. Is it better? Is it getting better now as far as like wait times and like, you know, access to healthcare? Is it actually getting better? Like, and I'm just talking about not the surgeries that we were talking about earlier. I'm just talking about like urgent care for life-threatening symptoms, because that's what my wife was dealing with.
You mentioned, for instance, trying to get care for your wife when you know the hospital was full. And that's what people didn't understand about COVID. Well, so what? So if they get sick, they get hospitalized just like anybody else. But COVID patients stay in the hospital a really, really long time.
Yes.
So it really affects care. You know, there are so many people who died from COVID who didn't have COVID because they had heart attacks, they had strokes, they had traumas, you know, they had cancer.
The collateral damage death.
The collateral, exactly, because COVID was occupying all the beds. And I think we're kind of beyond that stage. Right. I still am seeing delays. The whole work from home transition really created a bottleneck when it came to things like insurance approvals. When you've got all your insurance flunkies, you know, who are already bureaucrats who slow down the process, and now they're all working from home. And some of these companies, I swear, they've used the pandemic as an excuse to just delay approvals.
Yes.
So we're seeing when we have a patient, for instance, who's an inpatient and needs to go to a rehab or a skilled nursing facility or a long-term acute care, the approval process is so much longer than it used to be. The reimbursement process is longer for hospitals. We take on patients from who are patients of other healthcare insurance plans, other healthcare organizations. They're part of that, but we get them because we provide higher levels of care, certain specialties that their own system doesn't have. And now we're waiting. Even those other systems have always taken a long time to reimburse us. They take longer than ever now.
Oh.
The whole cycle is longer. And that in turn affects patient care.
It absolutely does. And people
we don't hesitate. We'll treat anybody. We will care for anybody. We don't care what your insurance is. We'll work all that out later. We're focused on getting you well.
Yes, and that's what it should be.
But the bottom line is those reimbursements matter. The paying the bills matters. That's what keeps the lights on. That's what allows us to keep doing what we're doing. And there's so many delays on that. And that in turn delays care. We've had, there's a horrible crisis and shortage of providers at this point. A lot of people chose to retire through this COVID thing. A lot of nurses have tapped out and said, I can't do acute care anymore. I'm done. It's too much. The combination of the cognitive dissonance of dealing with the public and their denial of COVID, combined with healthcare organizations that are straight up abusive to their staff. I'm sorry, it's abusive to short staff. To expect these people to work the long hours that they work without breaks, without relief, to make them pick up extra hours. It's never ending. And it's too much. It has to stop. We're burning out our nurses.
It's all for profit.
We're burning people out. We're burning them out, and it's not okay. So all of that, I think, has had a real effect on patients' access to care and sort of the throughput of moving patients through the system from the ER to the inpatient out the other side, through their treatments and on to the next phase. It's just affected all that. There are some people who are really keeping it moving. Case managers, social workers, cancer navigators. They are an excellent resource, an invaluable resource that help keep the process moving, and not to sell short the medical assistants and the back office staff. They work tirelessly, endlessly, hounding these insurance companies, going after them for these approvals, submitting more and more documentation to support claims or treatments or these kinds of things. Not all physicians' offices have those resources, and that slows down the process as well, because it's expensive to hire people
to outsource
these insurance companies and get these approvals pushed through.
What now with everything that I've what else do you think could ultimately benefit people? You've obviously dealt with patients like my wife, and you've obviously gone through a little bit of cancer treatment yourself. What do you think? What else? Besides, obviously, I'm going to be doing these, trying to make like memories with people taking on the boat with the lake and trying to help them pay their medical debt. What else do you think could?
I think again, remembering collaboration over competition. There are so many little grassroots organizations like the foundation that you're starting that all have good purpose. I think one, you've got to keep your focus. You can't do all the things by yourself. So you need to choose. When you choose that one focus on that, and then look for those opportunities. Look for the helpers. Look for the others. Look for the other organizations. There are other organizations to benefit women with cancer, women with breast cancer in particular. Partnering with them and saying, hey, your organization does this, my organization does that, all for the same population. Let's work together. And building those partnerships and networking in that way, I think, again, creates that groundswell, creates that grassroots movement that benefits more patients and improves their quality of life. And now you have a larger network of resources for your foundation. That networking is really, really key.
That's I'm gonna be definitely focusing on that for sure. I didn't even think of that, honestly. We've been brainstorming. Me and I have I'm fortunate enough to have a more than a few people around me that are willing to help me with this. But a couple in particular, we just had a meeting last night and we were discussing a bunch of options, possible fundraising events locally. You know what I mean? So we're talking about doing a couple of day concerts, and the national Whitewater Center is in Charlotte. Very, very nice. They've already kind of agreed to let me do something there. I was thinking about doing.
When you're looking at fundraisers, for instance, when people say, well, what's this fundraiser for? And you say, well, I have this foundation. Well, what does your foundation do? You have to be able to make the tough decision and say, my foundation does this. rather than we'd like to do this and this and this and this and this and this, because you would like to do all the
honestly,
things. Of course, you want to do all the things, but maybe your bandwidth isn't that. And keeping that focus and be able to have a very specific message that really makes people understand this is what we're doing. And this is our focus right now. And we'd love to expand into these other areas later, but right now we're going to partner with other groups to do that.
Yeah.
And keeping that focus, I think, will make you very successful.
Yeah, my number one goal is to provide the whole boating club thing. That was just me and a friend of mine decided to join a boating club anyway. So I'm just going to utilize that as a way to help people out. But the main focus that I have right now is I want to issue these spending cards. I think that would be the most beneficial way for me to immediately start helping people with their everyday struggles of just having to pay their bills. So if I could issue these spending cards, that would be my number one focus is there. And then as my funding increases, I'm willing to go down other avenues of assistance, whether it be with therapeutic care, whether it be like supplemental IV therapies while you're going through chemotherapy, or alternative treatments, which are not covered by your insurance company, which are extremely expensive for the everyday average person. These are things that I want to ultimately be able to provide. But first and foremost, I want to just provide immediate financial assistance through these medical spending cards. That's my number one focus, honestly. Other than that, I will see how my funding goes and then branch off from there. But I have a tremendous support system, it seems, around me to help me with make these ideas a reality. Mostly right now, I'm just focused on fundraising. I got to get funding before I can even actually decide to do much. Like it's kind of I'm in the waiting game now to see how much funding I receive, through the podcast and through my local fundraising events. It's all new. It's a whole new world for me doing this. So I'm just wading the waters,
That's all any of us can do.
Yeah. I just keep swimming like Dory. That's what I've been doing since my wife got first diagnosed with cancer. I've been saying that forever. I just keep swimming. That's it. That's all that
Life
anybody
is
can
lived
really do.
Forward.
Yes, that's right.
Absolutely.
And I think we can wrap up this. We've been on for a while now. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I know you're busy. We've already discussed all of your tasks that you have on just a normal day. I as well have a busy life. I appreciate you coming on though. I really do, and discussing these things with me.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And shedding some light on this reality that's for most people is a very daunting reality of trying to navigate the medical field and insurance companies and healthcare systems and bills and life in general. It's just a very daunting task for a lot of people, and I'm really, really appreciative that you came on to help me spread the word about this. So I thank you again. This is Miss Karla Scott, and I appreciate you coming on, and I hope that we can get another podcast in the future. We'll be in discussions on how we can further spread the word, and maybe we can get back at it again.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. And if this is your first time checking out the podcast, welcome again. If you're a returning subscriber, please click the like and subscribe button. If you're a first timer, if you're returning, thank you. And I appreciate all the support, and hope you enjoy this podcast as much as me and Karla did. And it was a great experience, and thank you again.
All right.
And I'll be in touch. Bye.